In this video, I'm going to talk about CIS30A Week 2 Lab number 1. For the rest of the other questions, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, you can also see part 1 lecture video for week 2. I had illustrated example on how you would be able to use the built-in methods to be able to output the appropriate string. So for number 1, it asks you to create the Python program that has a variable that holds your first name and add statements to fulfill the following tasks. Display the first and the last letter of your first name. That's part A. B, the number of characters of your first name. C, the first and the third letter of your first name. D, the second to the last letter of your first name. And E, second to the last letter of your first name using length. So to start, what we should do is we should, number 1, declare the variable like what it's asked us here and assign it our first name. So put down your first name. And I had written a program for this, so I have a variable called my name and I assigned it Casey, and that will be the first step that you need to do. Next, we wanted to address part A, which is to print out the first letter of my first name and the last letter of my first name. So in this case, I'm using 0 for the first letter of my first name. It's going to print out the K here. And so it tells me that the first letter of my first name is K. So I printed that out here using index 0. I print out the last letter of my first name using -1. And so when I print for the next one, I print for part B, I wanted to print out the number of characters in my first name. I can so simply use the length method. So I'm going to print. I have a string. It says number of characters in my first name. And then I use a separator, comma, length, my name. And that's going to give me the number of characters in my first name. So since my first name had 5 characters, it gives me 5. Then next I wanted to print the first to the third letter, and that would be easy using the index. So I had created another variable called subname, and it's going to store the index from index 0 to index 3. And notice I'm using a colon here and put these inside the square bracket. And that would be part of my name. So it's going to print the first to third letter of my first name is, and that's going to be KAS. And another way that you can do this is you can do the variable is that will be the variable that you previously assigned your name, and you can leave this blank, which is going to default to 0, and it's going to go to 3. So that will be the same. That's why you see the same as here. So that's 2 ways to do this. One way is to put in a 0, the other way is to leave it blank before the colon. Next, I'm going to print the second to the last letter. We can have it the second to the last letter. We can go from the N and to the second. So here what we would have is the second to the last letter of my name. So from the second letter, that will be A. So that will be index 0. And to the last, I simply just leave that blank. And we can print and show that. So what I did here is I have a variable to be able to store the sliced name, and then I print that. Next, I have a variable called sub3, and in this one, I'm going to slice my name using length. So similar to the other one, so instead of leaving this blank here, I would start with the second letter, and I'm going to go to the end of my name, the entire length of my name, and then I simply print it out. So that will be the same as using the length or leaving it blank. So this kind of walk you through on how to do number 1. We are using string slicing, and I also illustrate additional example in the part 1 of week 2 lecture. So for number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, check out part 1 of the lecture as well.